Hello everyone and welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight we're going to talk about the story of the vanishing shadow of Independence Night, which concerns the mysterious disappearance of 31-year-old doctoral student Deundray Cottrell, told in a second-person narrative style. Are you ready? Let's begin. The midnight sky over Birmingham crackles with bursts of red, white, and blue, the fireworks painting fleeting shadows across the yard. You're surrounded by the scent of charcoal and the sticky sweetness of funnel cake, yet a chill creeps along your spine. Despite the laughter weaving through the humid July air, you probably won't survive this thrill unshaken. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. I want to know where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step past the rusted gate, the metal rattling like an unanswered question. A tingle runs down your spine as the cicadas drone in unison, their chorus rumored to mirror the whispers of those lost on Independence Night. In fact, the FBI's first missing persons unit was established in 1939, decades before modern alerts like silver notices were ever conceived. Historians still argue whether rapid response protocols reduce disappearance timelines significantly, but you know that in these first hours, every instinct you've got counts more than any departmental rule. The patio lights flicker as a breeze kicks up embers from the barbecue pit. You glance at the uneven flagstones underfoot, half obscured by shadows cast from sparklers. Somewhere beyond the fence, fireworks bloom against the ink-black sky, each explosion sending tremors through your chest. You remember hearing that on nights like this, some eyewitnesses claimed to see a fleeting silhouette cast by the largest aerial burst, hence the whispered nickname the Vanishing Shadow. It feels like folklore colliding with fact, yet here you are, pulled into a real-life mystery. Your pulse quickens when you notice how the laughter dips every time a rocket soars overhead. It's as if the boom unsettles something buried deep in everyone's mind. You strain to catch snippets of conversation. Someone debates grilling burgers, another frets over sparklers near dry grass. The ordinary chatter contrasts sharply with the dread knotting in your stomach. You're hyper-aware of how swiftly joy can curdle into suspicion. Ahead, the picnic table is strewn with half-empty soda cans and a scattering of red Solo cups. You kneel to examine footprints pressed into the damp earth, slightly larger than Deundray's size 11 sneakers. A prickly thought crosses your mind: could someone have followed him here? Even though it's Independence Night, when strangers crowd backyard barbecues statewide, you can't shake the feeling that this gathering is different. A distant cousin tips over a lantern, its gentle glow sputtering before plunging part of the yard into darkness. You flick on your phone's flashlight and sweep the beam across the grass. The beam catches on shredded fabric snagged on the bottom rail of the fence, threads of navy blue twill that remind you of the jacket Deundray always wore. A faint smile tugs at your lips at the memory of that battered coat, until reality sinks in: fabric isn't the person wearing it. You rise, the sudden stand making your legs tremble. The orchestra of fireworks and cicadas fades into the background as you focus on the tiny tears along the jacket's sleeve. The air tastes metallic now, like the prelude to a storm. You fumble for your phone, remembering that it lay abandoned on the porch steps when the panic first hit. In hundreds of missing persons cases each year, early clues like these often prove crucial, but only if someone bothers to look. Someone behind you whispers, "Is this serious?" You don't need to answer. Their question hangs as a challenge to every skeptic who thinks adults just wander off. The battery on your phone blinks red, but you stay rooted, shining its weak light into corners no one else seems to notice. Shadows pool in every hollow, as though the night itself is swallowing secrets whole. You recall reading that in true crime legend, ordinary objects become talismans: an unbuttoned shirt cuff, a lone shoe, a misplaced ring. Each tiny detail can crumble an airtight alibi. Tonight, it feels like the fence railing and the fabric hold the opening lines of a story no one asked to write. And as the next firework rises, leaving glowing embers in its wake, you understand that in the hours to come, you will chase every flicker, every half-heard whisper, until the truth refuses to stay hidden. You step into the backyard courtyard just as the first rocket arcs overhead, bursting into a halo of red and gold that spills across the weathered pine fence. The porch lights hang like lanterns in a Japanese summer festival, casting dappled patterns on vinyl chairs, a battered metal swing set, and a stone birdbath collecting rainwater from last week's storm. The air is thick with the sweetness of funnel cake dusted in powdered sugar, layered over the tart zest of freshly squeezed lemonade. Beneath it all, the humidity clings to your skin like an unwanted embrace. 4th of July fireworks have dazzled Americans since the first celebration of independence in 1776, when colonists lit bonfires and rocketed fireworks into dark skies. Historians still argue whether these displays foster unity or exacerbate hidden anxieties. Tonight, each thundering boom seems to carry both exhilaration and something more ominous. Cicadas drone in rolling waves, their chorus rumored to mirror the final gasps of those who vanished on past Independence nights. Local legend claims that on rare July 4 THS, a single aerial shell can cast a fleeting phantom silhouette against chain link, a so-called vanishing shadow murmured among Birmingham's old guard, as though the night itself conspires to conceal something you're determined to uncover. You drift between clusters of relatives, your senses heightened by the interplay of light and shadow. A gaggle of children in glow-stick bracelets chases sparklers, their giggles pinging off the low brick wall as they zigzag between lawn chairs. Nearby, a group of cousins stands in a tight huddle, leaning in with hushed tones that jab at your curiosity like pins on a voodoo doll. Someone jokes about the neighbor's new electric grill, but their laughter rings hollow. You notice the way your great-aunt pins her shawl, her dusty gaze flicking to the shed door as if expecting someone to emerge. Across the patio, a stray dog pads around the cooler, tail wagging in cautious arcs, sniffing at plastic cups tainted by sweet punch. At each skyward explosion, voices rise in awe then sink back to uneasy murmurs, as though the thunderclaps have the power to silence even the bravest among you. A few guests peer at their phones, fingers tapping anxiously against glass, replaying grainy videos of the previous year's flash floods. You realize that amid this casual festivity lies a fragile veneer barely masking deeper currents of mistrust. Your cousin Marcia hovers by the grill, flipping imperfect burgers with gloved hands. She wears a baseball cap emblazoned with her alma mater's logo, its brim casting a shadow over eyes that dart like startled birds. Her hands tremble ever so slightly, a detail you catch only because that jacket you found once belonged to her brother. You replay the memory of Marcia and Deundray arguing weeks ago about his thesis timeline, her voice rising above cicada song. Meanwhile, Uncle Leroy sits stiffly on a folding chair near the patio umbrella, nursing a seltzer water and offering you a nod so tight it feels like an accusation. His mouth moves in silent rehearsals, as though he's practicing a confession he's too afraid to voice. You watch Leroy's shoes tap impatient rhythms against the patio stones, each tap a countdown he refuses to acknowledge. Aunt Janice drifts through the crowd like a ghost of hospitality, clutching a tray of deviled eggs that no one seems brave enough to touch. Her smile is fixed, almost artificial, like a porcelain doll shoved onto a mantel for decoration. It dawns on you that beneath each polite gesture lies a churning sea of questions. Who last spoke to Deundray? Who volunteered to check the side gate? Who felt a tremor of fear when the shadows lengthened? Just beyond the speaker's reach, Henry, Deundray's lab partner, leans against a post. He's in his usual lab-issue khakis and a pressed polo, looking oddly out of place amid paper plates and checkered tablecloths. His fingers flick open and close the lighter repeatedly, the tiny flame dancing against his palm like an unsteady heartbeat. Earlier he'd offered you a hushed theory about how certain metals in the laboratory can refract light in unpredictable ways, a fringe detail that now nags at the back of your mind. You step closer, lips parted to question him, but he only gives you a faint shrug before clipping the lighter shut. When he shifts, you catch sight of a folded sheet of paper peeking from his back pocket, its corner creased, as though he's been running calculations in secret. Above you, the jazz standard morphs into a saxophone solo so sultry it feels almost intrusive under the pop and crackle of fireworks. You recall a rumor that night vision goggles worn by crime scene investigators sometimes produce phantom outlines. Could that explain the vanishing shadow whispers? Or is someone orchestrating those eerie shapes to distract from the real threat lurking just beyond the lantern's edge? Drawn by the clatter of plastic cups, you wander to the picnic table strewn with remnants of childhood summer, watermelon seeds lined like chess pieces beside half-melted ice cream sandwiches, ketchup smeared across paper plates. The sticky ribbon of barbecue sauce on a napkin catches your eye, the smear pattern resembling a faint fingerprint. You lift a cup with gloved fingers and examine it for smudges, a greasy thumbprint by the lip, a sheen of sweat where someone gripped too tightly. Maybe the same hand that tore at the barricade fence. The strand of golden gum clinging to a chair leg feels like an absurd detail, yet you know that in countless investigations ordinary items prove pivotal. Nearby, a stack of graham crackers and marshmallows sits untouched, an aborted attempt at Esmore's finish that hints at a sudden distraction. You imagine Deundray standing here minutes before he vanished, idly toasting a marshmallow and glancing over his shoulder toward the fence. Under the soft glow of a paper lantern, the table feels less like a gathering spot than a tableau of fleeting moments, each discarded crumb and overturned cup a silent witness to actions erased by time. A sudden boom rings out, louder than before, and you catch movement behind the shed door, a flicker of a leg disappearing into darkness. You freeze, the picnic table's debris forgotten, heart hammering. The neighbor said that door is never locked, anyone could slip inside unseen. It hits you that this gathering is less a reunion than a carefully arranged stage, each person an actor in a play they never auditioned for. You grip the edge of the table to steady yourself, recalling your sister's words from hours ago. The rest of the world stayed bright, but the shadows moved with cruel intent. In the furnace heat after a firework blast, the night seems alive, breathing through the cracks in the fence boards. You straighten, resolve hardening. The vanishing shadow has found its stage, now you must decide whether to script the next act or vanish into the darkness alongside it. You pivot on your heel, flashlight trembling in your hand as you head back toward the fence. The soft hum of the fan in your ears is drowned out by the distant pops of lingering fireworks, each boomer echoing like an abandoned heartbeat. Your gaze locks onto a dark shape draped over the top rail, an outline so familiar it twists your stomach into knots. You step closer, the beam slicing through shadows until it illuminates a navy blue jacket, torn as though caught in desperate hands. The fabric's frayed edges curl under your touch, revealing rough seams that buckle in a way no ordinary rip could produce. You probably won't survive this sight unshaken, you think, because this jacket belonged to Deundray. Mainstream crime historians note that organized missing person investigations only emerged in the late 19th century, as law enforcement realized adults can vanish without a trace just as easily as children. Historians still argue whether early centralized registries saved lives or simply collected headlines. Tonight, you're convinced every registry entry would shout with the urgency this shredded coat commands. You crouch, gingerly tracing the jagged tear near the left shoulder. The underlayer of padding peeks through fibrous threads, your fingertips brush against something sticky and warm. Could it be blood, or merely barbecue sauce dragged from an earlier mishap? You dab at it with a clean corner of your shirt sleeve, noting the reddish-brown stain that blurs into the fabric. It stains like a bruise forming beneath skin, a marking that screams of force and fear. A droplet clings to the tip of your fingertip, an ominous punctuation at the end of a sentence someone refused to finish. Along the bottom of the rail, near a splintered knot, your foot strikes something hard. You crouch again, careful not to disturb any hidden clues, and unearth Deundray's smartphone, screen cracked but still glowing faintly under the lantern's glow. It lies face up on the porch step, its background image a smiling selfie from a campus conference. You tap the home button, half expecting it to vanish. Instead, the lock screen offers a pinned notification: family reunion starts at 9 p.m., sent 8 hours ago. A calendar reminder set in his own handwriting, promising ice cream and lawn games, now feels like a trap. Fringe whispers around town claim that on late Independence nights, phones left behind call out by themselves, as though begging for retrieval, an eerie trick of electromagnetic interference or something else entirely. You press your palm to the screen, reading the last text, "See you soon," from someone labeled J. Morris. Your pulse doubles at the implication that the person of interest might have known Deundray's exact schedule down to the minute. Beneath the "See you soon" line, a second notification glows, a missed call from your sister, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. You recall her voice trembling, asking if you'd seen your brother. Now you understand how little your family mattered to whoever stole him away. Each detail folds into the next as you scan the scene. The rail's rough wood gouges match the pattern of ligature marks forensic teams report finding on victims who struggle against restraints. You drag a gloved finger along the grain, catching another thread from the jacket. This time, you spot a tiny smear of dirt, not the red Alabama clay that coats every backyard footstep, but a darker loam, almost pitch black. A soil sample could narrow down where he was dragged, if anyone cared enough to test it. Historians still argue whether soil analysis truly pins down crime scenes or merely gives detectives false confidence, but to you, this speck is a signpost screaming for answers. You flip the phone to examine the cracked back panel, noticing microabrasions identical to those on the shed door hinge near the birdbath. The shed, an unremarkable structure of peeling paint and warped wood, loomed like a sleeping giant in the periphery earlier. Had Deundray sought refuge there? Or did someone drag him in after the fireworks masked his screams? The night stretches on, each crackle overhead tempting you to follow its shadow deeper into darkness. Your flashlight beam dances across the yard, revealing lawn chairs kicked aside, a lone sandal lying heel up in the grass, and a scattering of spent sparklers burned to stubs. You picture Deundray sprinting toward the fence, heart pounding as loud as the rockets overhead. Maybe he saw someone, or something, lurking in the shadows. A fringe rumor threads through your mind, that on July 4th in Birmingham, some say phantom figures slipped through chain-link fences, bodies sustained by adrenaline and fear alone. You shiver, though you know that most of these tales trace back to one elderly neighbor's fever dream. Footsteps crunch behind you. You whirl, shining the light on your great-aunt, whose shawl flutters like a morning veil. Her eyes glisten with unshed tears, her lips trembling as she asks, "What did you find?" You lift the jacket and phone toward her. She inhales sharply, her breath misting in the humid air. You meet her gaze, sensing a spark of defiance igniting behind her grief. She nods toward the shed. "He went in there," she whispers. "He went in there, and I don't think he ever came out." In that moment, the backyard transforms from a festive stage to a crime scene frozen in time. You rise, jacket in one hand, phone in the other, as the cicadas crescendo into a symphony of unease. The distant boom of another firework punctuates the silence that follows, and you realize this is your cue to take action. Each piece of evidence you clutch feels like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. You remember your sister's earlier words, "They think it's just a lost partygoer, but this is bigger." Now, with the jacket and phone in your grasp, you hold the first physical proof that Deundray didn't choose to vanish. You probably won't survive tracing this trail unscathed, but you also know that you can't let his story disappear into the night. With a firm exhale, you turn toward the shed, letting the lantern's glow guide you. The vanishing shadow has drawn its first breath, and you step forward to reclaim it. You lean against the fender of the police cruiser as Officer Ramirez stamps his boot against the grass, kicking up red Alabama clay that clings stubbornly to his soul. The flashing patrol lights strobe across the backyard like an unwelcome disco, illuminating the fence slats you inspected only moments before. You watch as two uniformed detectives exchange glances, their badges glinting in the firework glow. They approach with hands tucked casually into their utility belts, as though they expect you to offer the missing doctoral student on a silver platter. You swallow the lump in your throat and steel yourself. This is when the official story begins. "Must be an adult wandering off," one detective mutters to his partner, voice low enough they think you can't hear. He taps the tip of his pen against a notepad, then flicks it shut. The other nods, eyes half-lidded, shrugging as though to say, "Let's wrap this up." You clear your throat. He left his phone and his jacket, you say, holding out the cracked screen and ragged blue twill like smoking guns. But they barely glance at your evidence. This casual dismissal stings worse than any slap. True crime aficionados note that before the Lindbergh Law of 1932 made kidnapping a federal offense, local authorities often brushed off disappearances as troubled runaways or family disputes. Historians still argue whether that law actually deterred kidnappers or simply fragmented jurisdictional work. Tonight, you feel that old-era shrug all over again, a relic of investigative inertia you refuse to accept. Officer Ramirez flips open a Polaroid camera and snaps a photo of the jacket draped over the fence. The flash gouges dull impressions into the darkness, and for a heartbeat you see the frayed sleeve like a ghostly hand beckoning you onward. The detective scribbles no signs of struggle in his notebook, even though the rip in the coat looks less like wear and tear and more like the aftermath of a violent tug. He thumbs through his phone, scrolling through cat memes, then offers you a half-hearted apology, "We'll send a patrol car by later." In the meantime, maybe he's visiting friends. You suppress a laugh that tastes bitter in your mouth. A fringe tidbit flits through your mind. Old-timers in Birmingham whisper that on Independence Night, police radios pick up phantom chatter from bygone eras, ghost dispatches ordering officers to clubs and barns that haven't existed for decades. Some claim those spectral misdirections lead to lost time in real investigations. You glance at the squad car's roof antenna, half expecting static to warp into a 1930s-era call to the Jefferson County Jail. The notion is absurd, but here, tonight, anything seems possible. You push closer to the detectives, voice low but steady. "Check the shed," you insist, nodding toward its warped door. He went inside. The taller officer hollows out his cheeks, trying to look serious, then shakes his head. "No prior missing persons report, ma'am," he says without looking at you. "Adults forget phones all the time. If he's not back by dawn, come find us." He tucks his notebook into his coat pocket and strides away, leaving you with the echo of his indifference. You probably won't survive letting them close the case this easily, you remind yourself. After all, studies show that the first 48 hours in a missing person case are the most critical. Historians still argue whether rapid response protocols reduce disappearance timelines significantly or merely shift blame to underfunded precincts. Here, the clock is ticking, and you know it. A uniformed officer rakes his fingers through his hair, muttering something about fireworks interference. He waves his flashlight toward the fence. "Probably just cut by a snag," he says, gesturing to the torn jacket. "Nothing to see." You feel rage ignite in your chest. How dare they minimize trauma with that offhand shrug? You take a step forward, ready to unleash every ounce of sisterly fury you possess. But then his partner sighs, peering into the yard's perimeter as though noticing the scene for the first time. His eyes flick to the serrated edge of the coat, then to the broken shards of your phone screen. There's something in his expression, an unsettling blend of curiosity and calculation. He draws a breath, as if contemplating whether to wade against the tide of indifference or to bow out with the rest. You meet his gaze and hold it, watching the moment stretch. Somewhere behind you, the cicadas drone on, their ceaseless chorus like a ticking time bomb. You remember reading that in 1967, the FBI formalized behavior analysis units in response to patterns of dismissed leads, another chapter in the evolving art of detection. You wonder if anyone ever told these officers about the BAU, or if they think profiling is just TV magic. Your voice catches as you speak again. There are footprints alongside the fence rail, size 11. They're fresh. You point to muddied impressions glistening under the cruiser's flashing lights. The officer leans down for a closer look, flicking his penlight across the tracks. He kneels, brushing away clay with a forefinger. You see conflict flicker in his eyes, as though he's caught between protocol and the nagging truth under his fingernail. The senior detective steps back into the light, clearing his throat. "All right," he says, voice clipped. "We'll run prints, dust for fibers. But you need to calm down." His admonition hangs in the air like a stale barbecue scent, unwelcome and suffocating. You swallow hard, nodding once, but the fury beneath your calm smolders like embers under ash. As they catalogued the scene, measuring tape unfurled, evidence bags crinkling, you slip aside to retrieve a plastic glove from your pocket. You slip it on with deliberate care. If they won't handle the fabrics, you will. Every fiber, every smear, matters. You tuck the glove into your pocket for later, determined to fund your own mini-investigation if you must. Behind you, the detectives flick on cameras, capturing every angle. The sheriff's cruiser idles at the curb, engine humming, its spotlight scanning the lawn like a searching eye. You realize the performance has begun, the official investigation taking shape under the harsh glare of bureaucracy. Yet, you know the real work will happen in the shadows they leave untouched. You take a step back, folding your arms over your chest. The investigators bustle, voices clipped and efficient, but you watch for the subtle tells, hesitations, glances that dart to the shed, a fleeting pause at the jagged seam of the jacket. These are the breadcrumbs they'll miss once they pack up. You tuck that knowledge away like a secret weapon. The detective in charge tucks his notebook back into his coat. "We'll be in touch," he tells you, voice flat. Then he turns his back, signaling his team to move on. In an instant, the official presence vaporizes, leaving only the blinking cruiser lights and the echo of donuts vanishing inside squad cars. You probably won't survive this night without losing something, your peace, your patience, maybe more. But you're not about to let Deundray's story slip into statistics or slipshod reports. As the fireworks echoes fade into distant rumbles, you step toward the shed, the patrol lights receding behind you, and whisper, "They'll have to earn the truth." You press your palms against the cool brick wall of the porch, heart pounding so loudly it drowns out the cicadas. Frustration coils through you like a live wire, every syllable you've swallowed up until now demands release. You remember that in 1967 the FBI launched its first National Crime Information Center, creating a centralized database to track missing persons across state lines. Historians still argue whether that database truly empowered families or simply funneled desperate reports into bureaucratic black holes. Tonight, you feel that tension, the promise of clarity tangled with the thicket of red tape. You round on the detectives who linger by the cruiser's flashing lights. Their uniforms glint against the charcoal sky, badges shimmering like silent witnesses to your fury. Do you know what it's like to watch your family's grief minimized? You challenge, voice low and steady, though each word vibrates with barely contained heat. The taller detective glances at his partner, eyes flicking away from your stare, as though your anger unsettles the carefully choreographed calm they plan to maintain. Behind you, the family gathers in a loose semicircle, faces bathed in alternating shadows and siren light. Your sister stands beside you, arms folded tight across her chest, skin pale as moonlight. You share a glance and a silent vow, you will not let them write Deundray off as just another runaway. Every instinct in your body screams that he never walked away of his own accord. That gaggle of children you saw earlier scrambles for their parents' legs, innocently oblivious to the dark undercurrents. You kneel to scoop up one of their abandoned glow sticks, a plastic wand that clicks with a hollow echo when you twist it. Fringe rumors swirl that on Independence Night, misplaced glow sticks flicker back to life miraculously, as though igniting themselves to signal hidden truths. You click the stick, it remains stubbornly dark. No self-illuminating messages tonight, but the snap under your fingers brings a small smirk, lightning rarely strikes twice. You rise and turn back to the officers. "You need to take us seriously," you insist. He left behind everything he valued, his jacket, his phone, his life. You see the junior detective's jaw tick, as though he's wrestling between protocol and empathy. You lean in, voice softening into an intimate whisper, "If you let this slip, you'll regret every unanswered question that haunts you in the dark." You probably won't survive letting them dismiss you, but you also know that raw confrontation can crack open the hardest hearts. Your sister steps forward, her voice trembling but unwavering. "My brother isn't a statistic," she says. "He's someone we love. We deserve answers." That simple truth lands like a bell toll, resonating against the officer's stoic reserve. In that moment, you sense the tide beginning to shift. He exhales, a long rasping breath that scatters clay dust across his boot. "All right," he says. His tone carries the weight of grudging respect. "We'll upgrade this to an active missing person investigation and bring in the county homicide unit." You hear the unspoken caveat, but don't get your hopes up. Decades ago, local sheriffs often refused to pursue adult disappearances without ransom demands, treating them as voluntary absences. Historians still argue whether that practice saved resources or left families to fight ghost armies. You choose not to dwell on it. As the investigator radios for backup, you turn to your family. Your mother clasps your sister's hand, tears glimmering in her eyes like dew on spiderwebs. Your father's shoulders slump, as though the weight of every unsaid apology settles there. You watch them, chest hollow with both dread and relief. This is the first real step toward justice, and you feel its tremor echo through every cell in your body. Nearby, your cousin Marcia presses a damp tissue to her lips. You recall her earlier tremors, small but telling. Now, her eyes flare with a mixture of fear and resolve. She slips you a folded scrap of paper scrawled with a street address and a name you barely recognize, Old Mill Road. Greg Thompson. You slide the note into your pocket. Fringe lore in Birmingham whispers that abandoned mill sites are hotbeds for clandestine gatherings, secret exchanges under the cloak of fireworks. You tuck that tidbit away, vowing to follow every thread no matter how thin. The cruiser's spotlight swings across the yard, illuminating the shattered door of the shed. Shadows pour from it seems like ink in water. You step toward the entrance, flashlight already in hand, and notice the detectives trailing behind. Their faces are taut with a new seriousness, proof, perhaps, that your insistence cracked through their initial dismissal. You pause at the threshold, noting the scent of damp wood mingled with something acrid, smoke residue from the fireworks, or something more sinister. You remember reading that modern investigators often overlook olfactory clues, even though scent detection was one of the earliest forensic tools. Historians still argue whether canine units trained for scent discrimination belong in every investigation or only the most extreme cases. Tonight, every whiff matters. Your sister spreads her arms, as though claiming the scene for family rather than for law enforcement. "Let me lead," she says softly. "I'm the one who knows him best." You catch her gaze, steady, resolute, and nod. You sense a quiet shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that the people closest to the victim often hold pieces of the puzzle no one else sees. You step inside the shed first, the old door creaking on rusted hinges like a warning. Inside, tools line the walls, hammers, shovels, coil of rope. Each object glints under your beam, laden with potential meaning. Your sister follows, her hand brushing against a workbench scarred by time. You both inhale deeply, steel resolve blending with the heady perfume of dust and possibility. Behind you, the detective marks the perimeter with bright yellow tape. The tape's crisp snap echoes in the confined space of the shed, as though sealing fate itself. You crouch beside the pile of leaves in the corner, recently disturbed, perhaps by a struggle. Fingers sifting through foliage, you find a single cufflink engraved with Deundray's initials. It's a tiny, shining testament that he was here, that someone forced him beyond laughter and lemons into fear and fight. Your pulse spikes at that revelation. You lift the cufflink to the dull overhead bulb, watching gold catch hope and dread equally. This is the moment when frustration became action, when you turned anger into resolve and defied indifference. You've ignited the investigation with your own fire. Outside, fireworks have dwindled to faint crackles, but inside this shed, every breath carries weight. You cradle the cufflink in one hand and press your other palm to the rough wooden wall, feeling its ancient grain. You promise yourself, you will see this through, whatever it costs. The shed's darkness looms, but your sister's steady breath beside you and your own racing heart forge a path of light ahead. You hover over the glossy white countertop of the makeshift command center in the dining room, the glow of the laptop screen dancing across your face like a late-night talk show spotlight. A framed photo of Deundray as a toddler winks at you from the corner, reminding you of the vivacious scholar he once was. The coroner's report lies open in front of you, its pages crinkling softly each time you turn them. You probably won't survive absorbing every grisly detail, but you steel yourself, because knowing what happened to him demands courage. The first mainstream fact hits you like a buried bullet. By the 1920s, American forensic pathology had standardized autopsy procedures, mandating meticulous external and internal examinations in all suspicious deaths. This protocol, born from high-profile cases like the 1896 H.H. Holmes trial, laid the groundwork for modern investigations. Historians still argue whether these rigorous standards truly deterred would-be murderers or simply lured them into more sophisticated methods. Tonight, you're grateful for every page of that century-old legacy. You lean closer, reading the bullet-point summary, multiple contusions consistent with blunt force trauma, ligature impressions on bilateral wrists, subdermal hemorrhaging around neck musculature. Each phrase feels mechanical, clinical, yet behind each term is the shuddering story of his final moments. You trace your fingertip across the words, imagining the pathologist's gloved hand probing those injuries, mapping the violence he endured. A quirky tidbit blooms in your mind. Local rumor insists that in some Birmingham morgues, bruise patterns fluoresce under ultraviolet light, revealing hidden lacy shapes, like the imprints of lace gloves from a bygone era. According to fringe chatter, the coroner remarked that Deundray's wrist marks looked eerily like parallel ribbon burns, as if someone bound him with ceremonial cords rather than garden twine. You can't verify the lace glove legend, but the image lingers, a spectral flourish on an otherwise brutal report. You click into the supplemental files, photographs of the torn jacket laid flat on a sterile table, fibers tested positive for human epidermal cells. The forensic technician's notes mention a smear of foreign soil embedded in the fabric, darker than Alabama clay, matching the sample from the fence rail. This mainstream technique, soil analysis, became popular in the 1970s when British investigators used dirt traces to link suspects to crime scenes. Historians still argue whether this method offers definitive proof or only enticing leads that can mislead. You tuck that debate into your back pocket, knowing you'll revisit it when you confront the experts. Your eyes flick to the list of substances tested in Deundray's bloodstream, trace amounts of a mild sedative, unexpected for someone who valued control above all. The toxicology report notes the presence of diphenhydramine, Benadryl, at half a therapeutic dose, enough to induce drowsiness but unlikely to be purely accidental. You recall how the promethazine cases of the 1990s used sedatives to incapacitate victims, and you shiver at the thought that someone might have slipped it into his drink at the picnic. You sense a pattern: the torn jacket, the soil, the sedative, all whispers of a premeditated abduction, not a drunken wander. You probably won't survive the coroner's narrative without a second helping of bravery, but you need every detail. You scroll to the cranial scans, CT images showing no fractures, no penetrating trauma, yet the report highlights subarachnoid hemorrhaging consistent with strangulation. Ligature compression injury, the note reads. You imagine the improvised rope that might have been used, the dull scrape of fibers against skin, the pressure that cut off his breath centimeter by centimeter. Your fingers tighten into fists, nails pressing crescents into your palms. A fringe notion flits through your mind. An obscure online commentator claimed that certain fireworks produce chemicals that, when inhaled, can mimic sedative effects. Could someone have used the explosion's residue to mask their own actions? You shake your head. This is the sort of theory that fuels conspiracy forums, not courtrooms. Still, you make a mental note to check with a chemist later. Your sister's text pops up on the screen. Anything new? You type back a single word: ligature. She replies almost immediately, bring the jacket to Dr. Patel tomorrow. She knows someone, a retired pathology professor who volunteers at the university hospital. You nod at the screen, grateful for this network of allies. Early forensic consultation can spell the difference between overlooked evidence and airtight case files. You swivel in your chair to face the stack of printouts on the desk: crime scene photos, floor plans of the backyard, CAD diagrams of the shed interior. You overlay the bruising diagrams on a template of possible restraining devices. The pattern on his wrists matches the imprint of a 6-inch diameter loop, the kind you find on heavy-duty garden hose clamps. Your pulse spikes at the thought of a jealous quarrel erupting from a simple family gathering. Another mainstream nugget emerges from your reading. The practice of documenting ligature marks with calibrated photography began in the 1980s, when medical examiners realized that precise measurements could stand up in court. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on quantification strips away the human element of tragedy. You reflect that the numbers on these pages represent the arc of his life, vibrant, promising, and violently truncated. Your phone buzzes again, this time with a notification from an anonymous tip line. Check the shed hinge screws, they don't match. You cross-reference with the shed maintenance log your cousin obtained. The last recorded service used Phillips head screws, the hinge now features hex bolts. That small discrepancy screams of a hurried repair, perhaps rigged after the fact to cover entry marks. You print the log entry and place it beside the coroner's documents. It's subtle, but you know juries can latch onto these tiny anomalies. You lean back, the chair creaking in protest, and close your eyes. The hush of the night presses through the window, interrupted only by distant traffic and the low hum of central air. You probably won't survive dwelling on the violence too long, you need to pace yourself, but this forensic mosaic demands your focus. You open your eyes and study the color-coded injury map, red for bruises, blue for abrasions, yellow for hemorrhages. It reads like a roadmap of suffering, guiding you toward truths no one would reveal voluntarily. A quirky aside surfaces in your mind. Rumor has it that a longtime Birmingham coroner once detected ghostly imprints of clothing folds in freeze-dried tissue samples, a supernatural glitch when bodies were stored too long. While you dismiss that as fanciful, you can't help wondering if some deeper mystery unfurls beneath the sterile slides and latex gloves. Your sister returns to your side, holding 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea. She sets one before you, the aroma of honey drifting in soft spirals. You smile at her, grateful for her steady presence. Together, you pore over the documents again, tracing connections between the jacket fiber report and the toxicology findings. Each cross-reference tightens the narrative: premeditation, forced restraint, post-mortem concealment. It all points toward a calculated killer, someone who knew his routines and vulnerabilities. You jot down a question for Dr. Patel: could diphenhydramine metabolize differently when combined with alcohol and fireworks residue? It's a led-by-expertise query, the sort that turns ordinary speculation into prosecutable leads. You nod, satisfied. Before you close the coroner's file, you pause at one final note. Historians still argue whether forensic science's triumphs outweigh its occasional missteps. That phrase catches you off guard. It's as though the coroner acknowledges the frailty of his own tools. You tuck that humility into your mental toolkit, knowing that even the best evidence can unravel under scrutiny. You file the report into a manila envelope labeled forensic findings and place it on top of your organized chaos. The weight of what you've learned settles in your chest, heavy and insistent. You probably won't survive releasing this information tomorrow without shaking off residual dread, but you also know that clarity is your ally. With the coroner's autopsy as your guide, you're ready to press deeper into the shadows, to challenge every assumption and illuminate every hidden corner. You stand, stretching stiff muscles, and slip the envelope into a backpack. The room feels colder now, as if the air itself recoils from the violence you've catalogued. Yet, beneath the chill, a spark of determination flares. You will honor Deundray's memory by turning these forensic whispers into a story loud enough that no one can ignore. You wake before dawn to the shrill ping of notifications scattering across your phone's screen like startled birds. Through the half-closed blinds, you glimpse the flicker of blue and red lights across the lawn, news vans lining the street like metallic vultures. Reporters cluster near the fence, cameras perched on tripods, their lenses trained on the very rail where you found that torn jacket. The air tastes of cold coffee and leftover funnel cake crumbs, and even in the quiet morning haze you can feel the tremor of anticipation as the media storm gathers strength. On the kitchen counter, your sister's tablet streams a live feed from Channel 13 News. You probably won't survive watching yourself on camera without cringing, but you press play anyway. The anchor's voice crackles with alarm. Family demands answers after doctoral student vanishes on Independence Night. Exclusive footage tonight at 10. You catch a glimpse of the reporter's reflection in the fence slats behind her, like you're watching your own nightmare being commodified for primetime ratings. True crime broadcasts really took hold in the late 1980s, when shows like America's Most Wanted first sent profiles of fugitives flickering across household televisions. Historians still argue whether those programs actually increased arrests or simply fed voyeuristic appetites. Now you find yourself caught between hoping for justice and fearing that every intimate family detail will be splashed across social media before you've had coffee. Beyond the window, you hear the hush of a drone buzzing overhead, its rotors beating a nervous tattoo in the pre-dawn air. Fringe whispers in some online forums claim that drones deployed for news coverage sometimes pick up EVP, electronic voice phenomena, of the missing, broadcasting ghostly whispers alongside riot gear live shots. You shake off the notion, you need solid facts, not phantom recordings. Yet the drone's mechanical hum feels almost mournful, as if it's trying to call out for Deundray too. You step outside, feet bare on the dew-coated grass. Camera crews swivel toward you, microphones extended like mechanical flowers. You smooth your shirt, heart fluttering like a moth trapped under glass. A reporter hustles forward, notebook in hand, asking you to repeat the story you just lived through. You open your mouth but close it again, the weight of your sister's gaze steadying you. The frenzy around you is a tangle of flashing bulbs and scribbled notepads, hungry for every fragment of sorrow you're willing to relinquish. In the distance, the soft click-click of a satellite uplink van's mast rising into the sky reminds you how swiftly private anguish becomes public spectacle. Social media erupts with hashtags, hashtag Find Deundray, hashtag Independence Night Mystery, spreading across timelines like wildfire. You probably won't survive watching strangers debate his fate in comment threads full of speculation and gifs of dramatic TV moments. Yet you scroll anyway, finding solace in a single heartfelt post, a college friend's prayer emoji and a plea for information. It feels like a lifeline in the ocean of noise. Later, you gather with your parents in the living room while your father sips lukewarm tea and your mother clutches a heavy stuffed bear from Deundray's childhood. The TV replays the same footage on loop, its glowing screen casting wavering shadows across the wallpaper. Your sister flicks the remote, switching between local affiliates, national networks, and even a 24-hour streaming crime channel. The relentless replay of your family's distress gives you a rash of guilt. Did you inadvertently sign a waiver when you called the police? A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. Some Birmingham residents swear that on nights of high emotion, the local AM station plays traffic reports interspersed with subtle Morse code messages spelling out the missing person's initials. You recall hearing that the station's transmitter dates back to the 1930s, originally used to send coded updates during World War II blackouts. Historians still argue whether these wartime codes evolved into modern broadcast gimmicks or linger as accidental echoes of another era. You dial the station anyway, listening for beeps hidden beneath the static. Between sips of tea, your sister's phone buzzes with a tip from a viewer who claims to have seen a figure matching Deundray's silhouette on a neighbor's porch cam at 11:42 p.m. You lean in as she narrates the grainy video, a dark shape frozen in the glow of a porch light, then vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Your pulse hammers in time with the reel-to-reel whir of the player. Even blurred, the figure's posture looks eerily familiar, like he was running, seeking refuge from something just out of frame. You probably won't survive digesting every second of that blurry footage, but you pause it, frame by frame, until sweat beads at your hairline. The media frenzy outside your door feels like a distant thunderstorm now. Inside, you're storming through still frames in search of a lifeline. You pause at one frame where the figure's arm juts stiffly, as if bracing against a fence rail, an echo of the torn fabric you studied with trembling fingers. By midday, the front yard has turned into a carnival of trailers, satellite dishes, and microphones. Your neighbors peer out from behind curtains, their eyes wide with morbid curiosity. You step onto the porch and everyone falls silent, reporters, camera operators, and gawkers alike. You probably won't survive this silent confrontation unspoken, but you raise your chin and say, "He's more than a headline. He's my brother." Your voice, calm and firm, cuts through the chatter. A local anchor seizes the moment, her eyes flicking to the lens as she urges viewers to stick around for updates. You realize your words have been captured live, destined for screens you'll never see. The adrenaline surges through you, anger, grief, defiance, all swirling into one bright flare of resolve. Inside, you retreat to your makeshift office where sticky notes cover every surface, phone numbers, addresses, photo stills. You sit at the desk and close your eyes, letting the hush of the house envelop you. The distant wail of a siren reminds you that life outside still moves. Somewhere in that swirl of breaking news and frenzied live streams, someone might hold the clue that frees Deundray from the night's shadows. You open your eyes and exhale slowly. The media storm rages beyond your walls, but inside, you have a mission: to sift through the noise, to find the strands of truth buried beneath sensational headlines. Historians still argue whether public pressure helps or hinders an investigation, but you know one thing for certain: silence is not an option. With a steady hand, you unstick the first note, an image of the house next door with a timestamp, and pin it above the laptop. You're not just the story now, you're the author of its next chapter. You sit across from Julian Taylor Morris in the cramped, windowless interview room, the yellow bulb overhead humming like a restless spectator. His shoulders are hunched, hands clasped so tightly around a styrofoam cup that the rim buckles under his grip. You probably won't survive watching his mascara-streaked eyes dodge yours, but you steel yourself. This is where comfort turns to culpability. "Tell me again where you were after the fireworks," you say, voice calm but carrying the weight of every sleepless hour you've endured. Julian swallows, lips parting and closing like a shutter, then finally mutters, I went to check on the grill." His voice cracks in the same place you heard it in the kitchen, the tremor that turned kindness into suspicion. Mainstream investigators note that the term person of interest gained legal traction in the 1978 Atlanta child murders, when detectives needed a catch-all designation for suspects without tipping off coroners or lawyers. Historians still argue whether that label unfairly taints reputations or simply gives law enforcement flexibility. You lean forward, studying the way Julian's tie sits askew, its tie clip glinting like a forgotten clue. Earlier, he'd worn a neat Windsor knot. Now it's sloppy, loose against his collar, suggesting a rush to discard ceremony for reality. You recall the torn jacket snagged on the fence rail, the flecks of dark soil under its lip, and the soil sample that matched the one on the shed's threshold. Suddenly, Morris's story sounds less like an alibi and more like a rehearsed stanza. "Which part of the fence did you inspect?" You press. His brow furrows. "I walked the perimeter. Everywhere looked fine." You catch the cheap cologne dancing around his collarbone, too sweet, like fireworks leftover in plastic bottles. Fringe chatter around town says that Morris once collected spent fireworks shells, hoping to reverse engineer their fuses. They call him the pyrotechnic poet, a hobby he claimed was purely academic. You tuck that quirky rumor into your awareness: if he's fascinated by fire, maybe he knows how explosions mask other noises. He glances at the narrow observation window, as though pleading for escape. You probably won't survive the sight of him trembling like a leaf in a storm, but you press on. Your phone pinged off the shed hinge at 11:43 p.m. It registered in the property's Wi-Fi logs. He blinks, startled. I thought it died." The lie slides out so easily, you almost admire its slickness. "Julian," you say quietly, "you offered to help look for Deundray. Then you vanished. You let that sit in the charged air." He shifts in his chair, knocking the cup to the floor. You bend to retrieve it, noticing a faint smear of barbecue sauce near the bottom, identical to the stain on Deundray's jacket. The sauce smear wasn't on any of the other cups you collected. This one was on the small table beside Morris's favorite lounge chair. You hold the cup up, spectating an invisible flicker of recognition cross his features. A mainstream technique called behavioral analysis is often used in interviews. Detectives watch micro-expressions, brief, involuntary facial movements, to gauge deception. Historians still argue whether reading these cues is scientific observation or imaginative overreach. You see Morris's right eye twitch, the corner of his mouth betray a rehearsed empathy. You note it silently. He finally exhales, leaning back as if the whole room might collapse. "Look, I loved him like a brother," he whispers. "Deundray was the only person who ever took me seriously." You swallow the lump in your throat. That admission could be genuine grief, or the opening gambit of a killer's confession. You've learned that the most dangerous suspects often cloak envy in affection. You fold your arms, keeping your tone neutral. "Envy can breed violence," you say, letting the words hang between you. His gaze flicks downward, and for a fleeting moment you think you glimpse relief, until you realize it's resignation, not remorse. You probably won't survive the next confession unblinking, but you need every truth he withholds. You slide a photograph across the table, a still from the neighbor's porch cam, the blurred silhouette frozen mid-stride. The caption reads 11:42 p.m., July 4th. Care to explain this? The image shows Deundray bending toward the fence, arms outstretched, while a second figure stands just inside the shed's doorway, Julian's broad frame, posture stiff. He stares at the print, finger tracing the pixelated edge of his own shape. "That's not me," he protests, throat thick. "My shirt was dark, not white." You point to the faint glow on his left sleeve, tiny flecks that could only come from handling fireworks embers. The technical report notes pyrotechnic residue in that exact position. When asked, Julian told initial responders he didn't participate in the fireworks at all. Now, he's cornered. The room's air seems to constrict, forcing every breath into shallow gulps. Outside the door, you hear the soft scrape of evidence bags and the muffled notes of the detective scribbling behind the two-way glass. You recall your sister's earlier warning, "He's too close to the flames." Tonight, you understand that intimacy can either save or destroy. "Why the sedative?" you ask, voice barely above a whisper. His jaw clenches. "It wasn't meant for him," he says. "Just a mixture for my allergy." But you remember the toxicology finding, diphenhydramine at half a therapeutic dose, enough to blur awareness but not incapacitate completely. Someone wanted Deundray subdued, just enough to hamper his escape. A fringe notion flits through your mind. Some allege that on Independence Night, local apothecaries mix sedative-laced lemonade for revelers who want a mild buzz. The rumor's unsubstantiated, but you've seen how towns wrap wrongdoing in tradition. You watch Julian shift, discomfort radiating. You probably won't survive demanding his cooperation much longer, but the case demands clarity. "Show me where you planted the rope," you say, sliding a map of the backyard into view. His hand hovers above the grainy aerial shot, thumb tracing the shed's outline. His fingertip stops at the rear door. "Here," he whispers, as though naming a ghost. "It was already broken when I lifted the latch." You lean close. "Your fingerprints are on those hex bolts," you say. "The hinge was replaced after the disappearance, but only you had the tools." He presses his palms into his eyes, burying his face in his hands. The only sound is his shallow breathing, punctuated by the distant hum of passing traffic. Finally, he looks up, tears slicking his lashes. "I never meant to hurt him," he pleads. "We argued. I grabbed him, but I didn't mean," his voice crumbles, trailing off. You remain impassive, letting the weight of his words settle. This is the moment when comfort gives way to confession, when the person of interest becomes the person who must answer. You probably won't survive the next steps unscarred, but you also know that by exposing every lie, you edge closer to justice for Deundray. You stand, collecting the photographs and maps. "Thank you for your honesty," you say, voice soft but unyielding. Now, we move forward with what happened next. As you step out of the interview room, the corridor's fluorescent lights buzz overhead. You feel the shift in the air, the moment when suspicion crystallizes into evidence, and Julian Taylor Morris can no longer hide in the shadows of Independence Night. You slip into the living room just as voices rise to a low, combustible pitch, the tension thicker than the humidity outside. Your heart lurches, because family reunions have a way of splintering when grief enters the room, something investigators noticed as early as the 1930s, when police first recorded how sibling testimony often contradicts itself under stress. Historians still argue whether those conflicting accounts stem from genuine memory fractures or deliberate self-preservation. Tonight, you're about to witness that phenomenon in real time. On the floral couch, your eldest sister, Marlene, paces like a caged bird. Her polished tone clashes with the threadbare upholstery as she accuses your younger brother, Marcus, of hoarding crucial details about Deundray's last hours. "He was the one who loaded the coolers," Marlene snaps, jabbing a finger toward Marcus's slumped silhouette. "He must have seen something." Marcus rubs his temples, eyes darting to your mother's trembling hands. You probably won't survive the emotional crossfire without feeling every accusation like a personal blow, but you brace yourself, you promise to guide this ship through the storm. A knock echoes from the kitchen doorway, and your Aunt Cora enters clutching a stack of faded legal envelopes. They're the will documents you found tucked away behind old photo albums, a reminder that even in tragedy, money waltzes through the pages. Fringe whispers in Birmingham claim that the Cottrell inheritance was contested as early as last Thanksgiving dinner, when Uncle Leroy reportedly changed his beneficiary instructions on a stolen flash drive. You shuffle the envelopes into a neat pile, exhaling slowly. You'll need these if rumors of inheritance motives ever reach a courtroom. Marlene's voice rises again. "Marcus, why didn't you tell them about the argument at the fence?" She gestures toward the side gate, where you discovered the jacket. You've heard this before, the question that cuts deeper than any blade. Marcus flinches. "Because I thought it was just two guys being bros," he mutters. "I didn't realize it was serious." You step forward, catching his eye. You remember the moment you saw them laughing one minute and scowling the next, tiny fractures in brotherhood that no one considered dangerous until it was too late. Your mother's tears spill over, her sobs rattling the antique vase on the side table. "You all think about money and blame before you think about him," she cries. That question hangs in the air, burning through every thought of grease spots or legalese. You probably won't survive watching her heart break again, but you also know that anger can fuel clarity. You kneel beside her, offering a gentle squeeze, your shared grief a fragile bridge across this widening chasm. Across the room, Marcia, Deundray's lab partner, leans against the window frame, arms crossed. Her face is set, unreadable. You glance at her and recall the night's earlier tremors and silent calculations. She's a scientist trained to sift fact from fiction, yet tonight she's caught in the crossfire of emotions she can't quantify. You wonder if she suspects more than she lets on, or if guilt weighs on her like the steam rising from her untouched tea. A distant cousin, Darnell, interjects with a whispered theory about the shed, claiming he saw Marcus slip inside during a lull in the fireworks. "It was dark," he insists, "but I thought I saw him near the door." The claim lands like a pebble in a pond, sending ripples of suspicion toward Marcus's corner. He straightens, defensive flame igniting his brown eyes. "I was checking the latch," he defends. "Not looking for a body." You probably won't survive the plausibility of that answer without flinching, yet you know every theory must be tested against evidence, not emotions. You rise and hold your hands out, calling for silence. "This isn't a courtroom," you whisper, voice low and firm. "It's a family home. We're here to find the truth, not tear each other apart." The room stills, as though your words have flicked a switch. You see Marlene's shoulders slump, Marcus's jaw unclench, Cora's grip on the will soften. Even your father, who's been silent in a corner, lifts his head, eyes bloodshot but clear. In that moment, you realize your role isn't just investigator, it's mediator, gathering shards of hurt into a mosaic that might reveal the path forward. Your gaze drifts to the mantelpiece, where Deundray's graduation photo stands between two mismatched candlesticks. You remember his proud smile, the night you gifted him that frame. You probably won't survive the weight of missing him, but the memory steals you. You draw a breath and continue, we need facts, not finger-pointing. If you have something, anything, now is the time. Your words echo the advice of detectives who've learned that the killer often slips when the pressure of family lies too close. Marlene bites her lip, scanning the faces around her. Finally, she exhales and exchanges a glance with Marcus. He was upset, she admits, voice cracking. Deundray was talking about cutting off a joint grant if he missed his thesis deadline. Marcus said he'd talk sense into him, but they argued. Marcus nods, eyes downcast. We nearly came to blows, he says. I held him back by the jacket. That fabric you found caught on my fingers. Your chest tightens, this confession aligns with the tear's jagged shape, the fibers fraying at precise intervals. Fringe chatter in the neighborhood insists that some arguments on Independence Night end with ritualistic challenges, daredevil feats beneath fireworks to prove courage. You shiver at the thought that a sibling spat might have escalated beyond your worst fears. Yet this admission stitches a new thread into the tapestry of events, a personal conflict, not a random abduction. You step beside your sister, adding quietly, did you see anyone else near the shed after that? Marcus shakes his head. No one. I was too busy stopping him. Marlene glances at Cora, whose lips tighten. You sense a hesitation, something unspoken in the way Cora turns away. You probably won't survive the prick of curiosity, so you ask, Aunt Cora, you were the last to see him with his phone, right? Cora swallows, nodding. He dropped it when he rushed past me, she says. I picked it up and thought he'd come back. Her eyes flick to the will envelopes on the couch. You know exactly what she's thinking, if he'd lived, who would inherit first? The room holds its breath. You realize that beneath the grief and blame lies a chilling possibility, someone close enough to understand both his routines and the property's layout may have calculated each move. Historians still argue whether family intrigue drives more crimes than passion or profit, but you know that tonight's revelations blur those lines into one lethal motive. You raise your hand and close the session. We've heard the frustrations, the rumors, the confessions, you say. Now we have to piece it together. The family exchanges weary nods, the atmosphere transformed from fractured to focused. You probably won't survive how raw this feels, but you also know that unity and purpose is your strongest ally. As you gather the will envelopes, the printed argument timeline, and the still sharp photos of the shed, you feel a fragile cohesion settle over the group. The rift remains, familial scars rarely heal in one sitting, but for the first time, you sense a shared commitment to find Deundray's truth. You tuck the documents into your backpack, resolve hardening like embers under ash. Tomorrow, you'll follow these new leads, armed with both evidence and this fragile piece. You step toward the door, pausing to look back at the gathered family, each face etched with sorrow and determination. Thank you, you say softly. We start fresh at dawn. The room exhales, and you slip into the night, carrying the weight of every confession and the hope that this family's fractured loyalties can finally guide you to justice. You wake to the glow of your phone's screen before coffee, hundreds of new notifications blinking like fireflies in a jar. You probably won't survive diving into this hive of speculation unscathed, but you swipe open the app anyway. A dozen threads claim Deundray's disappearance ties into a secret backyard cult rumored to convene only on Independence Night, while others swear the government tested experimental sedative-laced fireworks here in Birmingham. Public fascination with conspiracy theories surged after the JFK assassination in 1963, when Americans first glimpsed how hidden agendas could shatter trust in institutions. Historians still argue whether these fringe theories distract investigators from real leads or galvanize communities to uncover buried truths. You scroll past gifs of exploding rockets, pausing on one post that overlays a stylized Masonic compass symbol atop a firework blossom. Its caption reads, "They signal membership before the shadow falls." A shiver crawls along your skin as you remember the charred wood by the shed hinge and wonder if those sparks carried more than light. Later, You step onto your porch and hear Aunt Marcia muttering about the fireflies, an obscure group said to perform oath-bound rituals under cover of fireworks. You ask her to explain, and she leans close, voice dropping to an ASMR hush. They burn sage and chalk symbols in blood, believing the Fourth's pyrotechnics mask their chants, she whispers, her eyes glinting like embers. Anthropologists note that small cultic gatherings have occurred in rural America since colonial times, often blending folk practices with borrowed symbolism. You probably won't survive picturing Deundray caught in one of those secret ceremonies, but the image etches itself into your mind. You recall tracing his jacket's torn fabric earlier. Could those frayed edges have snagged on ritual bindings instead of a fence rail? Marcia's hands tremble as she sketches a crude rune on a napkin, a circle crossed by twin lightning bolts. You slip the napkin into your pocket, resolve hardening like cooled magma. By midday, you're poring over declassified documents on your laptop, FOIA requests, and dusty PDF scans stacked in a digital folder labeled Project Firework. You probably won't survive reading about Nkultra's 1950s experiments without feeling the air thicken, but the parallels are too striking: clandestine tests of sedatives, unknowing subjects, government agents observing from behind one-way glass. In one memo you find mention of Operation Citadel Glow, where innocuous-seeming fireworks contained aerosolized compounds meant to induce compliance. The language is redacted almost entirely, yet the date stamp, July 4, 1968, jumps out at you. Fringe blogs argue those tests never truly ended, evolving into covert operations during modern celebrations. You pinch the bridge of your nose, the hum of your computer fan seeming to whisper warnings. Could someone have revived these tactics for Deundray's disappearance? As dusk falls, you drive to the edge of town, following a tip about a long-abandoned pavilion off Old Mill Road. Your headlights slice through twilight until the structure looms ahead, a skeletal framework of rusted beams and collapsed wooden benches. The air here tastes of moss and old smoke, and you smell the acrid residue of spent fireworks scattered among broken glass. You probably won't survive wandering into this derelict shrine alone, but you step out anyway, flashlight in hand. Beneath a toppled picnic table, you spot chalk symbols matching the napkin sketch, faded peas intersected by angular lines. The beam catches another clue, a length of frayed rope lying in a spill of dark soil. You press your glove to the fibers and recall the deeper sample you collected from the fence rail. The soil granules are identical, pitch black, unlike local clay. You crouch to examine prints in damp earth, size 11, the same as those by the shed. Your heart hammers in sync with the cicada chorus, their summer song now tinged with menace. Somewhere behind you, the pavilion's decayed roof groans in the breeze. You strain to hear more, but only the night replies. You probably won't survive ignoring the hitch in your breath, but you force yourself to focus on the symbols scrawled into a concrete pillar, an arrow pointing north, a random cluster of X's, and beneath it, the initials DC carved deep. The realization hits you like a live wire: someone staged this as both ritual ground and murder site. The line between occult theatrics and calculated homicide blurs into one lethal design. Back at home, you scatter these findings across the dining room table: napkin, rope, soil samples, FOIA printouts, forming a constellation of clues that spans secret cults to government cover-ups. The hush of midnight presses against the windows, interspersed with distant traffic and a lone dog's bark. You probably won't survive the weight of these theories if you let them spiral unchecked, yet each thread demands pursuit. You lean over the table and tap the napkin's rune with trembling fingers. Whoever did this, you whisper, wanted the world to see shadows, not substance. And as you tuck the napkin into a sealed evidence bag, you vow to follow every eerie rumor, no matter how fringe, because sometimes the darkest truths hide behind the most outlandish whispers. You settle into the dim glow of the police evidence room, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead lulling you into a focused calm. On a stainless steel cart rests the digital DVR, an unassuming black box that could rewrite everything you thought you knew. You press play on the adjacent monitor and lean forward, the grainy footage flickering to life. You probably won't survive watching your worst fears materialize in pixels, but you hold your breath anyway. The timestamp reads 11:35 p.m., July 4th. You see Deundray stepping into frame from the left, cradling his phone and glancing over his shoulder. Mainstream accounts note that the first closed-circuit television system was pioneered by Siemens in 1942 to monitor V-2 rocket tests, an innovation born of wartime caution. Historians still argue whether these early setups prioritized safety or control, but tonight, every recorded frame feels like a lifeline. The camera's infrared lens casts the backyard in shades of gray. You watch Deundray pause beneath the paper lanterns, face illuminated in stark contrast. He shivers, tugging at his jacket collar, as though sensing someone, or something, lurking beyond the fence line. You recall how the torn fibers frayed at that same collar embroidery. Now you see him brush a stray sparkler tip from his sleeve. A quirky rumor floats through your mind. Some locals swear that on Independence Night, stray embers warp IR footage into ghostly silhouettes, the vanishing shadow, they call it. The effect could be optical illusion, or evidence of a second presence. At 11:38 p.m., the frame jumps. A tall figure emerges near the shed door, too still to be a trick of light. Your chest tightens as you recognize the posture, broad shoulders, hesitant stride, Julian's build. He steps away from the shed, pauses, then beckons Deundray. You lean in closer, heart hammering. This isn't the solo wander-off the detectives imagined, it's a rendezvous. Photographic forensics rose to prominence in the 1930s, when investigators realized that sequential frames can reveal actions too swift for eyewitness memory. Historians still argue whether cameras capture the truth or merely magnify ambiguity. The scene shifts again. At 11:41 p.m., Deundray moves toward the gate, phone held aloft as if for a flashlight. Behind him, the figure freezes, then turns back toward the shed. You squint, and the next moment the screen glitches, interference from fireworks overhead, perhaps, or something more deliberate. You rewind and play the glitch frame by frame, a flicker of movement, an arm waving, then a flash of dark fabric snagged on the fence rail. Your pulse surges. That tear pattern matches the jacket you examined, and the position aligns exactly with where you found it. This is the moment when theory becomes fact. You pause the video at 11:42 p.m. Deundray stands frozen, eyes scanning the fence as if searching for a hidden exit. The audio track whispers with the crackle of distant rockets. You probably won't survive the tension coiling in your chest, but you let the silent frame sit, each pixel a breadcrumb. Then, suddenly, the camera angle shifts to another vantage point, the neighbor's front porch cam, angled toward the side gate. You hadn't yet requested this feed, but Detective Nguyen's assistant slipped it onto the cart, noting its oblique view of the yard. You press play. The image is darker, the resolution lower, but you catch Deundray approaching the gate at 11:43 p.m. He hesitates, hand on the latch. Behind him, a pale blur drifts past the shed window. A fringe theory whispers in your mind. Some say that figure wasn't human but a residual echo of the vanishing shadow itself, an imprint left by fear. You push that aside, real people are terrifying enough. As the gate swings open, Deundray steps through, but the second figure never closes behind him. Instead, the camera lingers on the empty yard for several seconds. You rewind again to confirm, yes, the gate swings shut on its own, without anyone in view. Your throat tightens, wireless hinges replaced with hex bolts, the ones Julian handled. The timeline snaps into place. 11:40 he calls him over, 11:42 he moves toward freedom, 11:43 he vanishes. You lean back, mind racing. Each frame nudges a new question: did Julian lead him into a trap? Or did something else follow him through that gate? You recall earlier soil analysis, the pitch-black loam on the fence rail and in the shed. Now you see those particles scattered across the ground beyond the gate, glinting under IR light like spilled ink. Your sister's voice murmurs at your shoulder, though you didn't hear her approach. She grips your arm, silent solidarity in her eyes. Together, you watch as the final frames flicker to 11:45 p.m., then cut out entirely. No emergency alert, no movement, just the steady loop into nothingness. You probably won't survive digesting this without guilt clawing at your ribs, but you know the importance of every second. You eject the DVR disc and hold it between your fingers, the plastic cold and heavy as truth. Mainstream practices now emphasize chain of custody protocols for digital evidence, standards evolving since the 1990s to safeguard video admissibility. Historians still argue whether digital forensics outpaces legal frameworks fast enough to ensure justice. Here, your evidence teeters on the edge of both worlds. You stand and stretch, the room's fluorescent buzz fading as you step into the hallway. Beyond the metal door, you sense the rest of the team awaiting your summary. You tuck the DVR under your arm and flip the light switch behind you, plunging the room into silence. The spectral glow of those IR frames will haunt your mind, but they also hold the key. Deundray walked toward that gate, trusting someone close to him. Now you have to trace where he went next. As you exit, you glance back at the dark screen. The vanishing shadow played its final act in those few seconds of footage, and you're the only witness alive to that performance. With every frame catalogued, you inch closer to forcing the truth out of the night. You step out into the corridor, determination steady in your stride, ready to share the breakthrough that will shatter every disbelief standing between you and justice. You settle onto your couch just as another episode of Midnight Mysteries finishes streaming, the host's whispery recap echoing in your ears like a lullaby gone dark. You probably won't survive this late-night binge unscathed, but you lean in anyway, because the way true crime has transformed in the digital age holds clues to what's unfolding in Birmingham. Mainstream archives tell us that the first true crime bestseller, The Mystery of Marie Roget, hit shelves in 1842, setting the template for melding fact with narrative flair. Historians still argue whether sensationalized accounts then saved lives by raising awareness or simply capitalized on morbid curiosity, and tonight, you can't help but wonder where the Cottrell case will land in that debate. On your coffee table, beside a half-empty mug of chamomile tea, sits a neatly stacked row of podcasts, blogs, and conference pamphlets. You tap open a thread on a popular forum. Has Independence Night changed the game? Fingers scroll past heated posts debating journalistic ethics. One commenter insists crime podcasts peaked with Serial in 2014, another counters that the vanishing shadow narrative is already eclipsing it in audience engagement. You remember reading that the true crime podcasting boom surged by 65% between 2015 and 2020, fueling a public hunger for unscripted drama. Historians still argue whether this podcast era empowers citizen sleuths or muddies official investigations, but you know firsthand how every listener becomes a potential investigator in their own right. A quirky whisper drifts through the online chatter. Some locals claim that when you play the Vanishing Shadow theme under a full moon, you can hear Deundray's footsteps echoing in the backyard ambience track, proof, they say, that the case has tapped into something supernatural. You roll your eyes at the idea of EVP, electronic voice phenomena, bleeding through ASMR soundscapes, but the notion refuses to let go. If nothing else, it underscores how deeply this story has permeated collective imagination. You pause the screen and lean back, the cushions enveloping you like the dark folds of a theater curtain. It occurs to you how the Cottrell case has become a mirror for society's evolving relationship with crime stories. Once, crime news was confined to yellowing newspapers and late-night broadcasts. Now it's serialized, monetized, and algorithmically tailored. The use of social media polls to gauge public opinion on Julian's guilt feels worlds away from the crackling radio bulletins of the 1930s. Yet you recall that in 1932, the Lindbergh kidnapping spurred nationwide moral panics and dime store pamphlets, another era's version of clickbait and conspiracy. Historians still argue whether the Lindbergh coverage fueled vigilantism or accelerated federal reforms, and the parallels tonight are impossible to ignore. Your phone buzzes with a notification, an academic roundtable on true crime and public memory, kicking off tomorrow at the university. You glance at the registration link, a lineup of criminologists, folklorists, and media scholars ready to dissect cases like Deundray's. You probably won't survive sitting through a symposium on scholarly discourse without nodding off, but you bookmark it. The program promises a session titled When Ritual Meets Reality, Cult Myths in Modern Investigations, and you think of the rune-sketched napkin and the chalk symbols at the abandoned pavilion. If fringe theories blur lines between myth and method, perhaps scholarly scrutiny can help you separate the plausible from the paranormal. Leaning forward, you replay the neighbor's porch cam clip once more, this time noting the frame where the envisioned vanishing shadow silhouette seems to linger for a heartbeat longer than physics allows. Could that be an artifact of low-light sensors, or the fleeting residue of something else? You remind yourself that forensic video analysis has evolved dramatically since the 1970s, when analog tapes first gave rise to frame-by-frame examinations. Historians still argue whether technology outpaces the law's ability to interpret it, and you know your own DVR of that night's footage will be scrutinized in the same light. You slip your feet under a throw blanket and close your eyes, letting the room's hush cradle you. The debate around true crime's role in justice swirls like a smoke ring above your head. Is public obsession a catalyst for accountability, or does it obscure the very evidence you've painstakingly gathered? You recall staging your family meeting to temper raw emotion with methodical inquiry, a microcosm of balancing empathy with rigor. The case's trajectory, already charted through books, podcasts, and academic panels, now hinges on how you weave these threads into a narrative that honors both fact and the human cost. A final fringe whisper flits through your memory, that some experts believe the vanishing shadow isn't a person at all but a psychological projection triggered by fireworks-induced sensory overload. You shake your head, no projection, you think, just a very real loss that needs real answers. Yet the rumor reminds you that perception shapes reality, especially when facts are elusive and fears run deep. You stand and stretch, the blanket slipping to the floor. You probably won't survive allowing the debate to distract you from the hard evidence, but tonight, you let scholarly questions swirl around you like a gentle breeze. Tomorrow, you'll sit among professors and students, armed with the coroner's report, the DVR footage, and your own determination. You'll listen to the debates about ethics, media impact, and the rituals that spring from collective grief, and you'll emerge ready to harness that discourse to bring Deundray's story into sharper focus. You flick off the lamp and whisper to the quiet room. Historians still argue whether this case marks a shift in true crime scrutiny amid public obsession, letting it hang as your own guiding question. Then you step into the darkness, resolve humming through you like the last echo of a distant firework, prepared to turn collective fascination into the force that finally uncovers the truth. You wake on the crisp morning of trial week to a hollow silence in the house, broken only by the distant crow of a lone rooster, a sound that lodges in your chest like a promise of reckoning. You probably won't survive the weight of what's ahead without steel in your veins, but you rise anyway, pulling on the same navy blazer you wore when you confronted the detectives. Today, the courthouse looms larger in your mind than any crime scene, a temple of judgment where ritual and reality collide. You step into the car with your sister, the engines hum like a mantra guiding you toward the day's first battle. Mainstream court historians note that by the early 20th century, stenographic transcripts had become standard in American trials, giving journalists and the public verbatim access to courtroom drama. Historians still argue whether that practice elevated transparency or fed sensationalism, but for you, every recorded word could tip the scales between justice served and truth buried. Outside the Lincoln County Courthouse, the flag snapping in the breeze evokes every Independence Day you've ever known, and every freedom you fear has been stolen. Banners commemorating the holiday hang half-forgotten on the iron gates, their red, white, and blue faded like old dreams. You remember the slogan scrawled on a protest sign last week, "No liberty in silence." You clutch your briefcase strapped tighter, willing silence to break under the weight of evidence. Inside, the entry hall smells of polished wood and stale coffee. You pass rows of empty jury boxes, soon to be filled with strangers whose impartial eyes will decide Deundray's fate. A fringe rumor you heard at the courthouse cafe flits through your mind, that some prospective jurors bring miniature porcelain Liberty Bells in their pockets for luck, tapping them before entering the room. You suppress a rueful smile, luck seems a poor substitute for cold, hard facts. Your attorney, Mr. Hayes, greets you with a firm nod. He's arranged the exhibits on a wheeled cart, the torn jacket, the cufflink, the soil samples in sealed vials. You probably won't survive watching these artifacts return to public view without nausea, but you steady yourself by recalling the months of lab tests that turned fabric fibers into incontrovertible links. You catch his eye as he passes you a sheaf of marked-up transcripts from the evidence room playback. "We'll use these frames to question the alibi," he whispers. "Remember, timing is everything." In the hallway, supporters and detractors converge. A small cluster of family members offers quiet prayers, your mother clutching a rosary, your Aunt Cora bowing her head in solemn devotion. Nearby, buzzers of legal aides and reporters tap at smartphones, their screens illuminating eager faces. You probably won't survive their stares unflinching, but you step between both groups with measured calm, determined to carry both grief and resolve into the courtroom. You recall that in 1965, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Brady v. Maryland formalized the obligation of the prosecution to share exculpatory evidence. Historians still argue whether Brady disclosures truly level the playing field or simply add another layer of legal chess to an already arcane game. Today, you'll test the limits of Brady. You've provided the prosecution with your own analysis of the IR footage, the autopsy reports, and the chemical assays, and you intend to force them to address each deviation from their narrative. The bailiff's knock on the courtroom door jolts you back to the present. You follow Mr. Hayes inside, passing under a looming arch where the words "equal justice under law" are carved into stone. Beneath the stern gaze of marble judges, you take your seat at the table reserved for the defense's witnesses, though in this trial, you're the de facto lead investigator. You settle your briefcase onto the table, the sound of its clasp echoing like a starting gun. The judge enters, her robes whispering against the polished floor. You probably won't survive the gravity of her presence without reverence, but you bow your head and meet her clear gaze. The jury files in, seating themselves in a semicircle that feels both comforting and alien. These 12 strangers will watch you sift through the night's fragments and decide whether that shredded jacket and cracked phone tell a story worthy of conviction. Opening statements begin. The prosecutor's voice rings through the courtroom, framing Deundray's disappearance as a tragic accident diverted by misinterpretation. You recognize the rhetorical flourish, the impassioned nod to civic duty, the assurance that the community will be safer once the truth emerges. It echoes the orations of mid-20th century DA speeches that attempted to galvanize juries through patriotic fervor. Historians still argue whether such appeals bind jurors to public sentiment or undermine individual judgment. Then Mr. Hayes stands. He's calm but unyielding, rolling out the timeline you built frame by frame: 11:38 p.m. at the shed, 11:42 p.m. at the gate, 11:43 p.m. in the void. He gestures to the monitor where freeze frames of Deundray's last steps flicker in silent clarity. You watch jurors lean forward, some scribbling notes, others pressing lips together. You probably won't survive the momentary thrill of their engagement. It feels like the first real step toward accountability, but you let it wash over you and vanish. As jurors file out for lunch, you join your sister in the hallway. She presses a folded piece of paper into your hand, a list of questions she's canvassed among the family, witness recollections that didn't make official statements. "Keep these for cross-examination," she whispers. You tuck them into your blazer pocket. Behind you, the courthouse clock's pendulum sweeps forward, another heartbeat closer to verdict. In the late afternoon recess, you slip into an empty jury deliberation room under the guise of viewing exhibits. You unseal the evidence cart's holding case and run a finger along the cufflink's engraved initials. In dozens of trials since the 1920s, physical tokens like these have swayed juries more often than any forensic graph. Historians still argue whether tangible artifacts carry disproportionate weight over scientific testimony. Tonight, that cufflink must speak louder than an expert witness. A court clerk's soft cough signals the end of the break. You replace each item precisely as you found it, sealing the case once more. You probably won't survive retreating from the ring of justice, but you steel yourself for the afternoon's expert testimonies, the forensic pathologist reaffirming the ligature marks, the soil analyst affirming the non-native loam, and the video technician explaining that IR glitch wasn't equipment error but human interference. As the judge calls the courtroom to order, you rise to your feet, smoothing your blazer. The second wave of witnesses swells with authority, medical examiners in crisp white coats, phonograph-shaped spectrograph machines humming softly at the prosecutor's table. You watch them field rapid-fire objections, sustaining some, overruling others. You probably won't survive each legal volley without flinching, but you track every nuance, every ruling that could tip the balance in closing arguments. When the final witness steps down, the judge instructs the jury on the law, reasonable doubt, burden of proof, elements of kidnapping and homicide. You sift through phrases like surgical precision, each clause could become a lifeline or a noose for your case. Historians still argue whether jury instructions simplify or obfuscate the law's intent, and you feel that tension hanging between legalese and common sense. As the jury files out to begin deliberations, you and your sister exchange a brief, exhausted smile. You probably won't survive waiting for their verdict, but you slip into the gallery chairs, clasping hands as the hours stretch before you like a tunnel of uncertainty. Outside the courthouse, the flag flutters without fireworks, but you know the real explosions are happening inside those deliberation walls. You lean toward your sister and whisper, "No matter what happens, we've chased every shadow." She nods, tears glinting like tiny constellations of hope. You cradle her hand, feeling the tremor beneath her grip, and you understand that this trial isn't just the climax of an investigation, but the reckoning of every hope and horror you've unearthed. The jury's door remains closed, a barrier between doubt and conviction. And as you wait, you vow to stand ready, whatever the final verdict brings, because justice demands no less than every ounce of your resolve. You sit forward in the hard wooden pew as the bailiff's voice cracks through the hush, announcing that the jury has reached a verdict. The polished oak walls reflect the afternoon light, pooling in golden rectangles across the tiled floor. You probably won't survive the anticipatory hush without every nerve humming, but you steel yourself, because this moment will decide whether the vanishing shadow's secrets will ever see day. Your heart thunders like the first fireworks blast on Independence Night. You recall that the tradition of reading verdicts aloud in open court dates back to English common law in the 12th century, when public transparency was prized above all else. Historians still argue whether those ancient ceremonies empowered communities or simply staged spectacles to reinforce authority. Tonight, you wonder if this ritual will bring justice or leave the family with another shadowed question. The bailiff's steps echo as the jury files through the double doors, shoes tapping against the marble threshold. You notice one juror, a retiree you spotted nodding intently during your sister's testimony, clutching a folded scrap of paper in his lap. You wonder if it's a scribbled prayer, a lucky charm passed down like a whispered legend, much like the fringe chatter that on rare July 4ths, local jurors secretly tip their hats to the shadow for guidance. You shake away the thought, decision hinges on evidence, not folklore. The foreperson rises, robes rustling. The gallery breathes as one. You probably won't survive watching those 12 strangers shape your world without every muscle locked in place, but you hold your breath. The foreperson's voice is steady, "We, the jury, find the defendant." Each syllable resonates, dragging out like a distant firework echo. The phrase lingers, and in that pregnant silence, you flash back to the IR footage, the glitch frame at 11:41 p.m., where the silhouette turns away from Deundray, sealing his fate. That frame was your silent advocate, now you hope the jury heard its mute testimony. Guilty of kidnapping and homicide as charged. The words hit you like the final crash of a grand finale, rattling your bones. Chairs creak as the gallery exhales. You probably won't survive the release of tension without tears pricking your eyes, but you blink them back with fierce relief. The bailiff prods the jurors to return to their seats to confirm. The foreperson repeats, "Guilty on all counts." A murmur ripples through the courtroom, shock, relief, grief entwined. You lean against your sister, whose hand grips yours like iron. You remember the skeletal pavilion on Old Mill Road and the chalk symbols carved beneath its rotten beams, the same rune your cousin sketched in trembling pen. That rune felt like a curse until now, but in this moment it seems like a talisman of truth, banishing superstition with jurors' solemn oath. The judge's gavel falls twice, a double rap that summons stillness. You probably won't survive hearing her declaration without your relief mixing with sorrow, but you absorb every word. The court acknowledges the gravity of these findings and extends its deepest sympathies to the Cottrell family, she intones. The docket clerk begins processing sentencing dates, but your mind drifts to the shredded jacket and the soil-stained fibers, physical echoes of a night that nearly swallowed a life whole. Across the aisle, Julian Taylor Morris stands, face pale as whipped cream, hands shaking at the cuffs in front of him. His eyes flick to you as the marshals lead him away. In that glance, you see regret and fear, a distorted mirror of the calm he once wore. You probably won't survive the weight of his remorse without remembering every tense moment from the interrogation room, his tie askew, the barbecue sauce smear echoing the one you found on Deundray's coat. Yet justice has its own somber poetry. Outside the courtroom, cameras flash like persistent firecrackers. Reporters jockey for space, hoping for sound bites about the sentence that ended Birmingham's darkest celebration. You pause at the threshold, inhaling the June breeze that carries the distant scent of honeysuckle and gasoline from the fireworks depot. You remember the forensic lab's hum, the coroner's sterile slides, the soil analysis that matched black loam from shed to pavilion. Each scientific milestone led to this verdict, a testament to human perseverance over folklore. A quirky afterword coils in your mind. Local legend holds that when the guilty verdict is read on Independence Night cases, the cicadas fall silent for exactly 30 seconds, as though paying respect. You strain to hear the insects chorus through the courthouse's thick walls. There is only the distant hum of traffic and the collective exhale of a community exorcising its shadow. You turn to your family, gathering them into a tight circle in the hallway. Your mother's tears glisten like dew, your father's jaw tight with exhaustion. They lean on you, the investigator who chased every ember of evidence into the dark. You probably won't survive the surge of pride mingled with grief, but you hold them close, whispering, "We did it, for him." As you step out into the late afternoon sun, the courthouse steps feel warmer than the night you scoured the backyard. In the distance, a solitary firework blooms, someone's early celebration of verdict day. You watch the fleeting spark cast a shadow across the lawn, and for the first time since that fateful night, you feel the promise of dawn breaking through. With each step down the marble stairs, you leave behind the echoes of doubt and fear. The Vanishing Shadow's final act has played out, its secrets laid bare by evidence, testimony, and unyielding resolve. You probably won't survive forgetting the wounds this case inflicted. Memory is both a burden and a beacon, but you also know this verdict writes a new chapter, one where justice triumphs over mystery. You pause at the bottom step, looking back at the courthouse facade, its grand pillars standing as silent witnesses to history. You whisper to the empty air, historians still argue whether high-profile verdicts change hearts or merely close cases, and let the words settle like the last ember of a fireworks glow. Then you turn toward the gathering crowd, ready to lead your family home, where healing can finally begin. You stand on the front porch as evening light wanes into soft indigo, fingertips grazing the weathered railing where Deundray's jacket once hung. You breathe in the hush of that moment. 2 weeks have passed since the verdict, and the yard feels both familiar and strangely empty. You probably won't survive dwelling in this quiet for too long, but you lean into it, honoring the stillness that now follows so much noise. The city council declared a moment of silence in downtown Birmingham, marking the case's end with a public ceremony by the fountain. Mid-19th century memorial traditions often included hours of silent tribute following trials, an era when communal mourning was woven into town squares. Historians still argue whether those rituals deepened civic solidarity or simply masked unrest under ceremonial grace. Tonight, the echo of that past lingers in the courthouse fountains, droplets falling like hushed syllables of a story finally told. You cross the threshold of the house, where sunlight filters through the living room curtains, casting diamond patterns across the hardwood floor. The remnants of case files sit on the dining table, photographs, soil samples in tiny vials, the cufflink you saved from the shed. You run your thumb along their cool surfaces, reflecting on how each artifact carried its own hush of significance. Fringe gossip around town insists that some of those vials still hum with untapped secrets, as though their contents remember the shock of those July nights. Your phone buzzes with a single ping. It's a message from Dr. Patel, the retired pathology professor who volunteered his expertise. Soil analysis confirms non-native sediments at 3 locations. Schedule a full review. You tap to schedule a meeting for tomorrow, knowing that the legal team will need that confirmation for sentencing hearings. You probably won't survive the weight of further details without fatigue, but you also know that justice demands thoroughness, even in the calm aftermath. You make your way to the kitchen, passing the granite countertop scarred by late-night document piles. A kettle whistles softly, echoing the gentle chime of a clock striking 6. You pour tea into 2 cups, the amber liquid swirls like memories stirred in clear water. On the windowsill, a sprig of rosemary, a gift from a neighbor in condolence, rustles in the evening breeze. In ancient folklore, rosemary symbolizes remembrance, and gardeners once scattered its leaves to honor the fallen. Historians still argue whether such plant rituals eased grief or kept wounds tender beneath green leaves. You carry the cups to the backyard, where the shed stands silent under a slate sky. The new hex bolts glint silver in the fading light, replacements ordered by the family after the trial. You inspect their symmetry, recalling how Julian's fingerprints once lingered on those very edges. Now they represent the family's determination to reclaim that space. You probably won't survive seeing those bolts without pain echoing through you, but you also feel the quiet strength that builds in reclaimed places. As you settle into the swing on the back porch, tea steaming at your side, you consider the tapestry of voices that spoke for Deundray, his sister's unwavering fury, the detective's reluctant curiosity, the jury's solemn oath. Few cases travel from small-town backyards to journalistic headlines, looping through academic debates and fringe folklore, before resting back in the hands of those who knew him best. True crime's enduring grip traces back to Victorian penny dreadfuls, when sensational tales first sparked public fascination. Historians still argue whether such narratives empowered social reform or simply traded fear for profit. You lift your cup, watching the tea's surface glimmer like twilight. Memories of fireworks crackling overhead mingle with the hush of these final days. In your mind's eye, you see Deundray's silhouette one last time, steady, determined, reaching toward the gate. You release a slow sigh, acknowledging that while the case file closes, the memory of his life carries on. You probably won't survive this bittersweet balance of loss and relief, but you let the moment settle. Ahead of you, the fence rail awaits a new future. It may hold flower baskets or strings of lanterns, not tattered fabric. You envision children playing beneath its crossbars, laughter weaving through the cicada's hum rather than fear. You know real healing stretches beyond verdicts, weaving into daily choices, an open gate offered to friends, a lantern lit for passing neighbors, a shared conversation over tea. These small rituals mark the genuine aftermath, the living testament that shadow can coexist with light. As dusk's indigo deepens, you sip your tea and lean back, feeling roots of resilience take hold beneath the soil of grief and justice. You probably won't survive forgetting Deundray's absence, nor should you want to. Each memory stokes the flame of compassion. But you also know that new patterns of life are emerging, subtle as cicada wings, persistent as truth. You close your eyes briefly, letting the hush of that moment hug you, and whisper to the night, "We have turned the page, yet the story goes on." Night's violence softens as the first light of dawn filters through your window. You feel the weight of the journey recede, each breath a gentle reminder that healing has space to grow. The court's verdict echoes in memory, but now its harsh edges dull against the warmth of shared solace. You trace the comforting rhythm of everyday life, a neighbor's distant lawnmower, the hum of cicadas returning at midday, and the gentle steady pulse of your own heartbeat. Allow yourself to carry the lessons learned, that persistence in seeking truth can transform grief into purpose, that small details, threads on a jacket, echoes in infrared footage, whispered folklore, possess the power to illuminate darkness. Let the fragile peace you forged guide you now, a steady lantern in uncertain times. The story you shared will linger in minds and conversations, a testament to courage in the face of shadow. But beyond the case file and courtroom drama lies something deeper, the bonds of family that no fear can sever. You close your laptop, knowing that tomorrow holds both challenges and moments of grace. Remember to welcome each new day with vigilance and compassion. Let the lessons of Independence Night shelter you from doubt and inspire acts of kindness. And when the cicada's song returns in full chorus, may it feel less like a warning and more like an invitation to live fully, to breathe freely, and to honor the light within shadows. Embrace the calm, the gentle intervals between fireworks and silence, between questions and answers. Know that each dawn carries the promise of renewal, and that your quest for truth has not only brought closure but also strengthened the bonds of empathy. Sleep now, with the knowledge that shadows can never fully obscure the light you carry. Good night, listener. Sweet dreams.